Hello and welcome back to Dental PYQs. Today we're going to discuss the Human Anatomy August 2017 paper. So let's begin. Let's move on to the first question, that is, describe the muscles of mastication under origin, insertion, nerve supply, actions, and applied anatomy. They've given us 5 subheadings or ये 10 marker hai. So each subheading will carry 2 marks. Coming to the first muscle of mastication, that is the masseter. As we all can see in this diagram, it is a quadrilateral shaped muscle. Okay, and it has 3 fibers: superficial, deep, and middle. So the origin also is from 3 parts: the superficial part, the deep part, and the middle part. The superficial part is from the zygomatic process of maxilla and the anterior 2/3 of the zygomatic arch. The deep part is from the posterior 1/3 of the zygomatic arch, from the deep part. And जो middle layer है, it's also from the posterior 1/3 of the zygomatic arch, but it's from the deep lower border. Insertion from the lateral surface of the ramus and angle of the mandible. The nerve supply is from the mesenteric branch of the mandibular nerve. V3 means it's the trigeminal nerve. Mandibular nerve is a branch of the trigeminal nerve. This trigeminal nerve is one of the 12 pair of cranial nerves. Okay, the action is it elevates the mandible and the superficial fibers will help in protrusion of the mandible. Applied anatomy. Now the mesenteric hypertrophy is seen in patients with bruxism, and also there is tenderness in TMJ dysfunction. Coming to the temporalis muscle, as you can see from this image, it's very flared, so it's called as a fan-shaped muscle. Okay, it originates from the floor of the temporal fossa and deep surface of the temporal fascia. It inserts into the coronoid process and anterior border of the ramus of the mandible. Nerve supply is from the deep temporal branches of the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. Action, it elevates the mandible. Side-to-side movement will help in grinding, and the posterior fibers will retract the mandible. Applied anatomy, the temporalis muscle can get trapped whenever there are zygomatic arch fractures, which can lead to trismus or lockjaw. Okay, coming to the medial pterygoid. Now, as we see in this image, it's again a quadrilateral shaped muscle. Now, the origin is again from the two. We have the superficial head and we have the deep head. The superficial head, as we know, is small and it originates from the tuberosity of maxilla, while the deep head is a large head and it originates from the medial surface of the lateral pterygoid plate. Medial pterygoid originates from the medial surface of the lateral pterygoid plate. Now we have to remember this. Insertion onto the medial surface of the ramus and angle of the mandible. Nerve supplies by the medial pterygoid. Again, from the trigeminal nerve. Action, it elevates the mandible, assists in protrusion, and unilateral contraction will help in grinding your side-to-side movement. Applied anatomy, any spasm of the medial pterygoid can cause trismus or lockjaw. It's also involved in the spread of infection from the infratemporal fossa. Now coming to the last muscle, that is our lateral pterygoid muscle. As we all can see that the shape here is triangular or conical in shape. This also has two heads, an upper head and a lower head. Again, the upper head here is small. It originates from the infratemporal surface and greater wing of sphenoid, while the lower head is large. It originates from the lateral surface of the lateral pterygoid plate. Now, the deep head of the medial pterygoid again originated from the medial surface of the lateral pterygoid plate. Now, the lower or the large head of the lateral pterygoid originates from the lateral surface of the lateral pterygoid plate. थोड़ा confusing है, but if you remember medial and lateral, it'll be easy. Insertion, we have the pterygoid fovea and anterior margin of the articular disc. Now, ये insertion बहुत important है. Okay, because whenever we have any TMJ dysfunction or dislocation, it's always because of the lateral pterygoid muscle, because it will pull the articular disc forward. Okay. Now the nerve we have is the nerve to lateral pterygoid. Action, it depresses the mandible, protrudes the mandible, and also unilateral contraction will lead to side-to-side movement or grinding. Applied anatomy, okay, TMJ dislocation होगा, and it's also a landmark in mandibular nerve block whenever giving anesthesia. So this completes your 10 marker. I know कि बहुत छोटा है, summarize किया है. So whenever you're drawing, you can write it in separate paragraphs. So पहले you will write about the muscle, then you draw the diagram of the muscle, फिर लिखो origin, फिर insertion, then nerve supply, then action, फिर लिखो applied anatomy. Okay, so this will complete your 10 marker on muscles of mastication. Okay, let's move on to the next question. That is, describe the parotid gland under the covering, surfaces and relation, the parotid duct and the applied anatomy. So this again 10 marker is divided into 5 subheadings which will carry 2 marks each. Okay, so before starting, we will write a brief introduction, okay, of the gland. Para means around and otic means here. So it's a salivary gland that is present around the ear. It's one of the largest salivary gland and it weighs about 15 grams. Situation, superiorly we have the zygomatic arch, inferiorly we have the inferior border of the mandible, anteriorly we have the masseter muscle, and posteriorly we have the external ear and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Now coming to the first subheading, that is the covering or capsule of the parotid gland. The investing layer of the deep cervical fascia will form a capsule around the parotid gland where it splits to enclose the gland between the angle of the mandible and the mastoid process. So ये आपका investing layer of deep cervical fascia है and this is your parotid gland. ठीक है, ये यहाँ से ऐसे आता है, then it splits to enclose the gland and then again it joins. Now this splitting is happening at the angle of the mandible and the mastoid process. Now the capsule is made superficial lamina and deep lamina. जो superficial lamina है वो thick है and जो deep lamina है वो thin है. Superficial is adherent to the gland and it's attached to the zygomatic arch. जो deep lamina है, it's attached to the styloid process and the angle and posterior border of the mandible and also the tympanic plate. A part of this deep lamina is thickened to form the stylomandibular ligament, okay, between the styloid process and the mandible, which will separate the parotid and submandibular salivary gland, and this layer is pierced by the external carotid artery. It's also supplied by the great auricular nerve. If you write these points, you will be covering your capsule or covering of parotid gland. Now this gland will resemble a three-sided pyramid with the apex of the pyramid directed downwards. Means this is something how your parotid gland looks like. Apex is down and the base is upwards towards the zygomatic arch. ये आपका mandible. So now this gland has 4 surfaces, that's superior, superficial, anteromedial and posteromedial, and the borders are 3, that is anterior, posterior and medial or pharyngeal border. Basically, you can draw one diagram where you can see the tip is of the anterior border that's separating the superficial surface and the anteromedial surface. The posterior border is separating the superficial and posteromedial, and this is your medial edge. Now coming to the surfaces, we have the superior surface or the base. Okay, it's small concave upper end of the gland. Its relations are cartilaginous part of the external acoustic meatus, the posterior surface of the TMJ, the superficial temporal vessels and the auriculotemporal nerve. The superficial surface, okay, it's the largest of all the 4 surfaces as we saw in the diagram above. Now here the coverings are the skin, superficial fascia. Here superficial fascia is very important, okay, because it has branches from the anterior of the great auricular nerve, pre-auricular lymph nodes and posterior fibers of platysma and rhizorius. Then we have the parotid fascia and deep parotid lymph nodes. Then we have the anteromedial surface. It's grooved by the posterior border of the ramus of the mandible. Its relations are the masseter, lateral surface of TMJ, posterior border of the ramus, medial pterygoid and the branches of the facial nerve. Coming to the posteromedial surface, it's molded by the mastoid and styloid processes. It's related to the mastoid process with the sternocleidomastoid and posterior belly of digastric, styloid process and its structures, external carotid artery, and we have the internal carotid artery. Now coming to the borders, we have 3. We have anterior, posterior and medial border. Now the anterior border will separate the superficial surface from the anteromedial surface. Okay, it's related to the parotid duct, the terminal branches of the facial nerve and the transverse facial vessels, accessory parotid gland if present. They're not present always, agar hai to it is related. Then the posterior border will separate the superficial surface from the posteromedial surface. It overlaps the sternocleidomastoid muscle. The medial or pharyngeal surface will separate the anteromedial surface from the posteromedial surface. It's related to the lateral wall of the pharynx. So this will cover the borders of the gland. Now coming to the parotid or Stenson's duct. It's thick-walled, about 5 centimeter long. It originates from the middle of the anterior border of the gland. It runs forward and slightly downwards on the masseter muscle. So the course is not straight. We should remember that it's oblique. Coming to the relation, superiorly, it's related to the accessory parotid, the transverse facial and upper buccal branch of the facial nerve. Inferiorly, it's related to the lower buccal branch of the facial nerve. Now, at the anterior border of the masseter, the duct turns medially and it pierces the 3Bs, as in the buccal pad of fat, okay, the buccopharyngeal fascia, and the buccinator muscle. Now, this question is asked for 2 marks frequently. So, you should remember the 3Bs whenever they ask you: buccal pad of fat, buccopharyngeal fascia, and the buccinator muscle. Now, the functional note or keynote that we can write here is, because of the oblique course of the duct, okay, it prevents the inflammation when we are blowing. Termination, it opens into the oral vestibule opposite the maxillary second molar. This will cover your parotidia Stenson's duct. Now coming to the applied anatomy. Coming to the parotid swelling, also called parotitis or mumps. Okay, it's the inflammation of the gland which is commonly due to the mumps virus, which may cause severe pain because the parotid fascia is tough and unyielding. Matlab it's very securely or tightly attached, which will lead to pressure on the sensory nerve, which will cause the pain. Then we have the parotid abscess. There will be pus formation inside the gland, which can cause a painful swelling, and it may spread along the duct to rupture through the fascia. Then we have the parotid tumors. Commonly seen is the pleomorphic adenoma. Okay, it's a slow growing. It may cause facial nerve palsy due to involvement of the facial nerve that's passing through the gland. Okay, then you have the Fraze syndrome or gustatory sweating syndrome. अब इसमें क्या होता है ना, whenever there is a parotid gland surgery, okay, and we have the facial nerve and the auriculotemporal nerve passing. So instead of triggering the nerve to secrete saliva, the auriculotemporal nerve fibers are triggered, which will cause sweat instead of saliva. So whenever the patient is chewing, eating food, there's a lot of sweat that is seen near the parotid gland area. Then we have the parotid duct obstruction stone, or also called as pyelolithiasis. इसमें क्या होता है ना, there is stone formation in the Stenson's duct. So whenever the patient is chewing food or swallowing and there is secretion of saliva, because the inlet is blocked, it may cause pain and swelling. There is spread of infection or malignancy. Infection or cancer from the gland, it can spread to the deep cervical lymph nodes via the parotid gland lymph nodes. Okay? So this covers the 10 marker on parotid gland. So let's move on to the next question, that is histology of lymph nodes. This is a 5 marker. Brief introduction लिखेंगे. Lymph node is a small bean-shaped lymphoid organ which is present along the course of all the lymphatic vessels. It acts as a filter for the lymph and it plays a vital role in immune response. Okay, several lymph vessels will enter the node at its convex aspect. Now this is important, convex aspect, because we will see this in the diagram. Okay, it has an outer zone. Okay, that contains deeply packed lymphocytes and therefore it stains dark. It's called as the cortex. It's surrounding the cortex. There is a light staining zone in which the lymphocytes are fewer in number and it's called as the medulla. Within the cortex, there are several rounded areas called as the lymphatic follicles or lymphatic nodules. Now, each nodule has a pale staining germinal center which is surrounded by densely packed lymphocytes. Coming to the connective tissue framework, the lymph tissue is surrounded by a capsule, okay, which consists of the collagen fibers. Some elastic fibers are present and also smooth muscles can be present. There are numerous septa present in the trabeculae which extend into the node and they're called as the lobules. Okay, there is presence of B and T lymphocytes. Both B and T lymphocytes are present in the lymph node. The cortex is mainly made up of the B lymphocytes. The germinal center is a center of lymphatic nodules. They contain lymphoblasts, or also called as the activated B cells. Now, these B lymphocytes are stimulated by the antigens to enlarge and multiply in number whenever a foreign body is invading. Now, they form a dark staining rim called as the mantle zone around the germinal center. The mature B cells become the plasma cells, which are mainly found in the medullary cords. Fate of the lymphocytes entering the blood. Now, if they are stimulated by antigen, they will proliferate and form the B cells that That's the plasma cells and the memory cells. If they are not stimulated, they will leave the lymph node and return back to the bloodstream after a few hours. Then we have the paracortex. It's also called as the thymus dependent zone because this zone mainly contains the T lymphocytes, also called as the T cell zone. Now if you see the diagram here, okay, this is your lymphatic nodule. We have the marginal sinus. This is the capsule. We have invasions here inside from the capsule, which will divide these into lobules. This is the lighter staining zone and the dark staining zone. These that you see are the germinal centers. Okay. These are the medullary cords where you have the B cells present. These are the lighter staining medulla and the dark staining cortex. So this completes your 5 marker on histology of lymph nodes. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. That is formation, blood supply, nerve supply of the nasal septum. Here let's see the formation first. उसके लिए ना first we'll draw a diagram. ठीक है, ये जो है this is your cribriform plate of ethmoid. Okay, this is your perpendicular plate of ethmoid. This large bone that you see here is vomer. Okay, this bone that you see here is your nasal crest of the nasal bone. Okay, this cartilage in gray is your septal cartilage. The small part that you see here is the septal process of inferior nasal cartilage. This tip that you see here is your columella. ठीक है, we will draw this and इसके बाद we will start with the answer. Now the formation of the nasal septum is by the bony part, the cartilaginous part, or the cuticular या membranous part. The bony part is formed by the vomer and perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Okay, it forms the posterior 2/3 of the nasal septum. The cartilaginous part, that's the septal cartilage, and the septal process of the inferior nasal cartilage, it forms the anterior 1/3. The cuticular or membranous part, also called as the fibrofatty tissue, it's usually covered by the skin. The lower free margin is called as the columella. This is the tip of the nose that's present between the two nostrils. It's the most inferior part of the nasal septum. Now let's see the nerve supply, blood supply of the nasal septum. Firstly, we will see the blood supply. We will divide this into 4 parts, that is anterosuperior, anterosuperior, ये है आपका anteroinferior, this is posterosuperior, and this is posteroinferior part of the nasal septum. Now we will see the blood supply. The anterosuperior part is supplied by the anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery. Okay. Then you have the posterosuperior is supplied by the sphenopalatine artery, which is the main artery of the nasal septum. Okay. Then the anteroinferior is supplied by the superior labial branch of the facial artery. The posterior inferior is supplied from the branches of greater palatine artery. Okay. Now we will see the venous drainage. Now the venous drainage is not separate for all the 4 quadrants. Here the anterior nasal septum drains into the facial vein, both anteroinferior and anterosuperior, and the posterior will drain into the sphenopalatine vein into the pterygoid venous plexus. Same, the sphenopalatine vein into the pterygoid venous plexus. Okay. Now we will see the nerve supply. Anterosuperior is supplied by the anteroethmoidal nerve. Anteroinferior is supplied by the anterosuperior alveolar nerve. The posterosuperior is supplied by the posterior superior nasal branches from the pterygopalatine ganglion. And the posterior inferior is supplied by the nasopalatine branches of the pterygopalatine ganglion. Okay, one important point that we will see here is the Kisselbach's plexus or the Little's area. It's located in the antero-inferior part or in the vestibule of the septum, as we can say. It's formed by the anastomosis of superior labial, sphenopalatine, greater palatine and anterior ethmoidal artery. It's of clinical importance because it's the most common site of nosebleed, also called as the epistasis. So you can draw one diagram as a of the nasal septum, and the arteries that you will mark are the sphenopalatine, greater palatine, superior labial and anterior ethmoidal. Now the anastomosis is happening here, so it is forming the Little's area. This question is also important because it was previously asked in 2015. I will share the link above. So please do concentrate, and this is completing your 5 marker here. Let's move on to the next question, that is development of tongue and its anomalies. ये भी 5 marker है. So the development will write for 3 marks and anomalies of tongue will write for 2 marks. Okay, so this 3 marker will include a diagram also. Intro. The tongue develops from the floor of the primitive pharynx, that is from the first, second, third and part of fourth pharyngeal arches. The development begins around the 4th week of intrauterine life. Now I have summarized the development into a tabular column, so it's easy for you all to understand. The part of the tongue, the embryological source from where it's developing, and the arches involved and the structures formed. So the first part is the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. It's also called as the oral part of the tongue. It develops from the first pharyngeal arch. Okay, we have the 2 lateral swellings on either side and 1 tuberculum impar in the center. The 2 lateral swellings will overgrow the tuberculum impar, okay, and fuse in the midline to form the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Then we have the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, also called as the pharyngeal part because it's present behind. It develops from the third and a part of fourth pharyngeal arch. Okay, it's formed from the hypobrachial eminence, which overgrows the second arch, and it will form the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Now, this hypobrachial eminence again has 2 parts: the cranial part and the caudal part. We'll understand this with the help of a diagram. Okay, then we have the root of the tongue and the epiglottis region. Again, it's formed from the 4th pharyngeal arch. It's the posterior most part of the tongue. The muscles of the tongue will develop from the occipital myotomes, except the palatoglossus muscle, which develops from the 4th pharyngeal arch. Then we have the connective tissues and the vessels. They develop from the mesoderm of the pharyngeal arches. Now, dekho, we have the 2 lingual swellings on either side. They will move towards each other in the midline. They will overgrow this tuberculum impar and fuse. Okay, they will form the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. We have the foramen cecum. Now in this diagram, we can also see the hypobrachial eminence. It has 2 parts, the cranial and the caudal part. The cranial part here will grow and form the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, whereas the caudal part will grow and it will form the epiglottis region. Okay, so the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, the posterior 1/3 of the tongue are separated by sulcus terminalis. Okay, the midpoint is the foramen cecum that we see here, and along the sulcus terminalis we have circumvallate papillae that are arranged in the V shape. Clear? Then our diagram you should draw. Uske baad we'll write the anomalies of the tongue. Aglossia, it's complete absence of the tongue due to failure of development. Then we have microglossia, that means a small tongue is present. It's because of partial underdevelopment. Then we have the macroglossia, it's the large tongue. It's usually seen in conditions of Down syndrome and lymphangioma. Then we have the bifid cleft tongue. There is incomplete fusion of the 2 lateral lingual swellings. Then we have ankyloglossia, also called as the tongue tie. This happens when we have a short lingual frenum, which will restrict the movement of the tongue. Then we have the lingual thyroid, ectopic thyroid. This happens due to presence of the thyroglossal duct. The thyroid tissue remains at the foramen cecum. Then we have the fissured tongue. There are shallow, deep grooves can be present on the surface. It's a developmental anomaly. Okay. Now the question on tongue was also asked in our July 2015 anatomy paper. I will share the link above. It was asked as the origin, development, insertion, okay, and the anomalies. It was a 10 marker. So tongue is also a very important question that can be asked frequently. So the next question here is the constrictors of pharynx. They've asked us the attachments and the structures that are passing through them. So as we'll write an introduction, all the pharyngeal muscles, they will develop from the fourth and sixth pharyngeal arches, mainly formed by three constrictors of the pharynx. We have the superior, middle and inferior. All of these muscles are paired muscles. Each will arise anteriorly around the opening of the nose, mouth and larynx. The fibers will pass backwards and medially and they'll meet at the midline to form a fibrous raphe, which is called as the pharyngeal raphe. The inferior constrictor will overlap the middle will overlap the superior. So in turn, they're all overlapping each other and forming a layered arrangement like a stack. The fibers of superior constrictor reach up to the base of the skull in the midline. Okay, and on the sides there is a gap between the skull base and the superior constrictor. Now this gap is closed by the pharyngobasilar fascia, which is thickened at this part. The lower edge of the inferior constrictor will be continuous with the circular muscle fibers of the esophagus. Clear? Now we'll see the different muscles. The superior constrictor does not have any part. It's a paired muscle. Okay, it originates from the pterygoid humilus, the pterygomandibular raphe, the posterior end of the mylohyoid line, and the posterior part of the tongue. One thing is, it all starts from P. So you can remember the 4 P's for origin of superior constrictor. All the constrictors will insert into the median raphe on the posterior pharyngeal wall. The upper end is attached to the pharyngeal tubule on the basilar part of the occipital bone. The middle constrictor also is a paired muscle. It originates from the lower part of the stylohyoid ligament, the lesser cornu of the hyoid bone, and the upper border of the greater cornu of the hyoid bone. Again, insertion is into the medial pharyngeal raphe. Okay, now coming to the inferior constrictor. Okay, now this has two parts, the thyropharyngeus and the cricopharyngeus. As the name suggests, it originates from the lamina of the thyroid cartilage, the tendinous band across the cricothyroid muscle, and the inferior cornu of the thyroid cartilage. Cricopharyngeus, as the name suggests, from the cricoid cartilage. Insertion again into the median pharyngeal raphe. So now we'll draw a diagram. Here we're going to see this is your medial pterygoid plate. This is your pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay, now this here is your styloid process. Okay, the muscle that you see here is your superior constrictor. This is your middle constrictor. This one is your thyropharyngeal part of the inferior constrictor. This one is your cricopharyngeal part of inferior constrictor. This is your hyoid bone. This is your oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. And this is your cricoid cartilage. Okay. So let's see the structures that are passing through them. From the sinus of Morgagni, okay, this is present between the base of the skull and the upper constrictor of pharynx. The structures passing through are the auditory tube, levator valley palatini muscle, the ascending palatine artery, and the palatine branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery. Okay. Between the superior and middle, we have stylopharyngeus muscle and the glossopharyngeal nerve. Between the middle and the inferior constrictor, we have the internal laryngeal nerve and the superior laryngeal vessels. Below the inferior constrictor, we have the recurrent laryngeal nerve and the inferior laryngeal vessels. Now to remember this table in an easy format, we have a diagram. Okay. We will draw the base of the skull like this. Okay. Then we have the muscles. The muscles, that is the superior constrictor, the middle constrictor, and the inferior constrictor. Okay. This is your, okay, I'll write it on this side. This is the base of the skull. This is your superior constrictor. This is your middle constrictor. And this is your inferior constrictor. Okay. So now the structure is passing You can remember it as A, that is the auditory tube, okay, the L, that is the levator valli palatini, the ascending palatine artery, and the ascending pharyngeal artery, ALA. The next will be the glossopharyngeal nerve that passes and the stylopharyngeus muscle. From the inferior constrictor, we can say we have the superior laryngeal vessels and the inferior laryngeal nerve. Below, we have the inferior laryngeal vessels and the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The structures passing in between all these gaps, and down lower part you have your here. Esophagus will continue. Okay, so this finishes your another 5 marker on constrictors of pharynx. Okay, coming to the next question, blood supply and nerve supply of the scalp. The soft tissue that covers the cranial vault will form the scalp. It's made up of 5 layers. The mnemonic to remember the different layers is again scalp. We have the skin, superficial fascia or the connective tissue, epicranial aponeurosis or galea aponeurotica. Then we have the loose areolar tissue and the pericranium. Okay, now we look into the blood supply of the scalp, which is divided into in front of the auricle and behind the auricle. In front, we have the supratrochlear and supraorbital artery, which is a branch of the ophthalmic artery, which in turn is a branch of the internal carotid artery. The superficial temporal is a branch of the external carotid artery. Behind the auricle, we have the posterior auricular artery and occipital artery, which are both the branches of external carotid artery. The scalp has a rich blood supply both from the internal and external carotid arteries. They anastomose over the temporal region, ensuring good collateral circulation. Then we have the venous drainage. The veins accompany the same names of the arteries. Okay, we have the supratrochlear and supraorbital vein, which will unite at the median angle of the eye to form the angular vein, which continues down as the facial vein. Now the superficial temporal vein will descend in front of the tragus. It will enter the parotid gland, joins with the maxillary vein to form the retromandibular vein. This retromandibular vein was also asked in the exam of December 2015 human anatomy paper. Okay, so it's an important question. Please mark it as important. It divides into, in the parotid gland, the retromandibular vein will divide into the anterior division and the posterior division. Anterior will join the facial vein to form the common facial vein, and it drains into the internal jugular vein. The posterior division will join the posterior auricular vein to form the external jugular vein and drains into the subclavian vein. Then we have the occipital veins, which drain into the suboccipital venous plexus. Coming to the emissary veins, okay, they connect the extracranial veins with the intracranial venous sinuses to equalize the pressure, but due to this connection, they can also cause a spread of infection. Okay, so these emissary veins are parietal emissary vein, which passes through the parietal foramen and it will supply the superior sagittal sinus. Then we have the mastoid emissary vein, which passes through the mastoid foramen and supplies the sigmoid sinus. Then we have the diploic veins. Okay, they are present within the cancellous bone between the inner and outer tables of the skull. They carry newly formed blood cells. There are 4 diploic veins that are present. We have the frontal, which opens in the supraorbital vein. Then we have the anterior temporal diploic veins, which ends in the anterior deep temporal vein or the sphenoparietal sinus. Posterior temporal diploic veins, it ends in the transverse sinus. Then we have the occipital diploic vein, which opens in the occipital vein या फिर transverse sinus. Now we have to draw diagrams as it's a must. Okay, for extra marks, we'll understand the venous drainage first. Now this is your supratrochlear vein, which joins the supraorbital vein here at the medial angle of the eye to form the angular vein. This continues down as the facial vein. Okay, then here we have the superficial temporal vein, which joins the maxillary vein to form the retromandibular vein. This retromandibular vein inside the parotid gland will divide into the anterior division and the posterior division. Anterior division will join with the facial vein to form the common facial vein, and it drains into the internal jugular vein. The posterior division of the retromandibular vein will join with the posterior auricular vein to form the external jugular vein, and it drains into the subclavian vein. These are the main vessels. Then you have the small emissary veins here and there. Okay, and these are your ophthalmic veins. Coming to the arterial supply, we have supratrochlear, supraorbital, superficial temporal, the posterior auricular vein and the occipital. Okay. Wrong हो गया. Okay, coming to the arterial supply, we have the supratrochlear, supraorbital, superficial temporal, the posterior auricular artery, and the occipital artery. Coming to the nerve supply also has the synonymous names. Okay? We have the supratrochlear, supraorbital, zygomaticotemporal, temporal branch of facial nerve. This is the motor nerve. Then we have the auriculotemporal. These are all in front of the auricle. Now behind the auricle, we have greater auricular, lesser occipital, posterior auricular nerve, which is again a motor branch. Then we have the greater auricular and the third occipital vein. Two diagrams. Coming to the nerve supply, then again we divided into the front of the auricle and behind the auricle. Front, forehead and anterior scalp is supplied by supratrochlear, which is a branch of the ophthalmic division. Forehead and vertex, the front part is supplied by supraorbital. The anterior part of the temporal region is supplied by the zygomaticotemporal, while the lateral part of the temporal region is supplied by the auriculotemporal nerve. Okay, the motor nerve supply is from the temporal branch of the facial nerve. Behind the auricle, we have the area over and behind, we have by the lesser occipital. Back of the scalp up to the vertex is the greater occipital nerve. Lower part of the occipital region is by the third occipital nerve, and the motor nerve supply is by the posterior auricular branch of the facial nerve. So this completes your answer on blood supply and nerve supply of the scalp. Okay, let's move on to the next question. That is the boundaries, contents and applied aspects of the suboccipital triangle. The suboccipital triangle, usually it lies in the suboccipital region, that is between the occiput and the spine of the axis vertebra. Okay, it's a muscular space situated in the deep suboccipital region. The boundaries are formed by the superior medial, is formed by the rectus capitis posterior major and supplemented by rectus capitis posterior minor. It forms the medial border. Superior laterally, we have the superior oblique capitis muscle. Inferiorly, we have the inferior oblique capitis. Roof medially is formed by the semispinalis capitis, while the laterally the roof is formed by the longissimus capitis. Laterally by the longissimus and sometimes by the splenius capitis. The floor is formed by the posterior arch of the atlas C1 and the atlanto-occipital membrane. You'll understand this when we are discussing the diagram. The contents are, we have the third part of the vertebral artery. It's a very important landmark and also very important from the exam point of view. It's usually asked as a 5 marker or 2 marker. Then we have the suboccipital nerve. It lies within the triangle and supplies all the 4 suboccipital muscles. Then we have the suboccipital venous plexus, the network of the veins around the artery and nerve, and it drains into the vertebral and occipital veins. Okay, let's see the diagram now. The nerve here that you see is your occipital artery. Okay, and this is the greater occipital nerve. Okay, this that you see is the longissimus capitis. This is the mastoid process. Okay, then this is the superior oblique capitis. Okay, this one. The down one is the inferior oblique capitis. This is the third part of the vertebral artery. Okay, and this is the posterior arch of atlas. Okay, this is the spine of axis. The green one that you see here is the atlanto-occipital membrane. The inner one that you see is the rectus capitis posterior major. The front one is the rectus capitis posterior minor. And the one that you see here, muscle, this one is the semispinalis capitis. Okay, this one diagram will cover the boundaries as well as the contents of your suboccipital triangle. Coming to the applied anatomy, the clinical importance here is the vertebral artery is present. It can be affected by trauma or sudden neck movements, which will lead to the vestibulobasilar insufficiency. and the symptoms could be dizziness and visual disturbances. Surgical relevance. Okay, knowledge of this triangle is important in the posterior approaches for any surgical procedures to the atlanto-occipital region and also for exposure of the vertebral artery. It has an anesthetic significance also because the area acts as a landmark for the occipital nerve blocks, which are usually given to relieve headaches and occipital neuralgia. Infections or abscesses in the deep neck muscle may spread to this region due to its muscular and vascular connections. Okay, so this completes your 5 marker on suboccipital triangle. Coming to the next question, the carotid sheath and its contents, it can be asked for 5 marks or it can also be asked for 2 marks. The carotid sheath is a tubular facial sheath in the neck that encloses the vital neurovascular structures. It's a condensation of the fibroareolar tissue surrounding the main vessels of the neck. It extends from the base of the skull caudally to the first rib on the sternum. Okay, formation, we have the investing layer, we have the prevertebral fascia, and we have the pretracheal fascia. Anterior wall is formed by the pretracheal, posterior is formed by the prevertebral, and we have also components from the investing layer. So to just explain, investing layer surrounds the trapezius and sternocleidomastoid, while the pretracheal surrounds the vital organs in the neck, and the prevertebral surrounds the vital structures in the vertebral region. Coming to the contents, we have the common carotid or the internal carotid artery, the internal jugular vein, and the vagus nerve. This sheath is thin over the internal jugular vein. This is a point. Okay. Then we have the additional nerves are present in the upper part, that is the glossopharyngeal, accessory, and hypoglossal. These nerves will pierce the sheath at different levels. Now we'll see the diagram. Okay. Now this is your carotid sheath that's enclosed in green. Okay. We have the common carotid artery that is moving upwards, and then it branches into the internal and external carotid artery at the superior border of thyroid cartilage. Okay, here we have the branching. Then we have the internal jugular vein. In between the internal jugular vein and the common carotid or the internal carotid artery, we have the vagus nerve. Then you can also draw a cross section as we see here. This is your internal jugular vein. This is your common carotid, your internal carotid artery. This is your vagus nerve. Then you have the sympathetic trunk present here and also the ansa cervicalis just outside the sheath. So this covers your 5 marker on the carotid sheath and its contents. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. That is relations and blood supply of the thyroid gland. Now this question, thyroid gland, is very, very important. It's been asked both in the July 2015 and December 2015 anatomy paper, and it's been asked for 2 marks as blood supply, 5 marks as the blood supply and nerve supply, and also as a whole 10 marker. So you cannot skip thyroid gland. It's very important from the exam point of view. Coming to thyroid, it means shield-like. It's an endocrine gland. It lies against the C5, C6, C7, T1, embracing the upper part of the trachea. Now the relations, coming to the subheading that is asked, the relations will be covered as the lateral lobe, okay, the isthmus, and the pyramidal lobe. Okay, coming to the lateral lobe, we have 3 surfaces and 2 borders. Lateral, medial, and posterior surface, the 2 borders will be anterior and posterior. Lateral surface is covered by all the muscles, sternohyoid, sternothyroid, homohyoid, anterior belly of sternocleidomastoid. Medial surface is related to the larynx, so you'll have thyroid and cricoid cartilages, the trachea, pharynx, esophagus, cricothyroid muscles, and the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The posterior surface is related to the carotid sheath. Okay, we discussed the contents just above in the previous question, and also the parathyroid glands near the posterior border. Then we have the anterior border. It's related to the superior thyroid artery and anastomosis, while the posterior border is related to the inferior thyroid artery and the parathyroid glands. Then we have the isthmus. It lies in front of the second and fourth tracheal ring. It's covered superficially by sternohyoid, sternothyroid, and anterior jugular veins. Then we have the pyramidal lobe, if present, not necessarily present. So it extends upwards. It's often attached to the hyoid bone by the levator glandulae thyroidae. Now coming to the diagram. Okay, this is your superior thyroid artery, which branches into the superior laryngeal artery. The nerve here is your The nerve here is your superior laryngeal nerve, this one. It branches into the external and internal. Okay, so this is your plus internal laryngeal nerve, and this is your external laryngeal nerve. This is your hyoid bone. This is thyrohyoid membrane. This is the thyroid cartilage. This is your cricoid cartilage. This is the isthmus. Okay, and this big part that you see here like this is the lobe of thyroid gland. Okay, this is the trachea. This is the esophagus. Okay, one diagram labeling everything. Let's move on to blood supply. Superior thyroid artery is a branch of the external carotid artery which descends to supply the upper pole and anterior border of the gland. Inferior thyroid artery is a branch of the thyrocervical trunk of the subclavian artery. It ascends behind the carotid sheath, supplies the lower and posterior border of the thyroid gland and also the parathyroid glands. Then we have thyroid intermedia artery or the middle thyroid artery. It's a branch from the brachiocephalic trunk or the arch of aorta. It ascends onto the trachea and to the isthmus. Coming to the venous drainage, okay, we have superior, middle and inferior thyroid veins. The superior and middle are branch of the internal jugular vein, while the inferior is a branch from the brachiocephalic vein. So we'll see this diagram. Okay, this is the hyoid bone. This is your thyrohyoid membrane. Okay, now this here that you see is the brachiocephalic trunk. Okay, this is your subclavian vein. So from the brachiocephalic trunk, we'll have the inferior thyroid vein, which is supplying from below. This big one is your internal jugular vein. Okay, here these two are your middle thyroid vein, and this is your superior thyroid vein. Okay. Coming to the lymphatic drainage, we have the upper deep cervical lymph nodes all along the superior thyroid vessels. We have the pre-laryngeal or the Delphian node near the cricothyroid membrane. We have pretracheal and paratracheal nodes all along the trachea. So this completes your 5 marker on thyroid gland. Now coming to the 2 markers, we have the submandibular duct. Okay, it arises from the deep part of the submandibular gland. It's about 5 centimeters in length and 5 mm in diameter. It runs forward along the floor of the mouth, medial to the body of the mandible. It passes between the mylohyoid and the hyoglossus muscle. It crosses the lingual nerve, okay, superficial near the duct's opening. Termination at the sublingual caruncle on either side of the frenum of the tongue, the floor of the mouth. Sometimes we'll have 2 openings may be present. That is tubotympanic recess. Okay, it's a small dorsal diverticulum of the pharyngeal part of the auditory or the Eustachian tube. It's also called the primitive tympanic cavity in embryology. Location, it lies in the lateral wall of the nasopharynx, posterior to the pharyngeal opening of the auditory tube. It develops from the first pharyngeal pouch. During development, it enlarges posteriorly and laterally to form the tympanic cavity of the middle ear. Clinical significance, otitis media infection may spread from the nasopharynx to the auditory tube. Adenoid hypertrophy, whenever there is hypertrophy of the adenoids, it can obstruct the opening of the tubotympanic recess, which leads to middle ear effusion. A labeled diagram of trachea. Now trachea, as we know, is the windpipe. Okay, this is the epiglottis. Then we have the thyroid cartilage. Then we have the cricoid cartilage. Then we have the trachea here. Okay, it's about 16 centimeters in length, 2 to 3 centimeters wide. Okay, then we have the annular ligaments and the tracheal cartilage. That means it consists of D-shaped cartilages in the front. Okay, and they are present in about 60 to 20 in number. Posteriorly, we have the tracheal muscles present. Then here at the bifurcation of the trachea to the bronchus, okay, we have something called as carnea. It's a tracheal ligament that is present. It's like a ridge, like this. Okay, this is important. Branches of the third part of the maxillary artery. Okay, we have the posterior superior alveolar, infraorbital, greater palatine, pharyngeal, artery of the pterygoid canal, and sphenopalatine. Now you can remember this as pig pass. Okay, coming to the vocal folds, there are two folds of mucous membrane that project into the cavity of the larynx from the lateral wall. Each fold will contain a vocal ligament thickened from the upper border of the cricothyroid membrane, and it also has the vocalis muscle. It extends from the thyroid cartilage anteriorly to the vocal process of the arytenoid cartilage posteriorly. The space that is present between the two vocal folds is called as rima glottitis. The function is responsible for production of voice या phonation. Okay, so small diagram you can draw. This region that you see, the upper part is the epiglottis. Okay, the pink area that you see are the vestibular folds. The yellow that you see are the vocal folds, and the space between the two vocal folds is called as rima glottitis. Okay, so this covers your August 2017 Human Anatomy paper. Stay tuned for our December 2017 Human Anatomy paper. Like, share, and subscribe for more.